Kyle was the first to notice. One moment, the muddy footpath stretched behind them, its faint ruts and roots guiding the way back to their campsite, and the next, it was gone. The forest floor was uniform, a mottled carpet of pine needles and moss, as if the trail had never existed. He froze mid-step, boot pressing into damp earth, and tried to whistle. But the sound came out muted, swallowed almost immediately by the thick canopy. Wait, what? He turned back. It's gone. Maya and Tristan, a few feet behind, stopped too. The fog had begun to curl through the lower branches, thin and creeping, wet against their faces. Shadows pooled unnaturally, pressing along the trunks of tall pines. The forest smelled sharp with pine and damp earth, but something else lingered, something metallic, faint, that clawed at the edge of perception. Tristan frowned. The trail? You're kidding, right? It's just covered. Maybe the rain last night washed the soil. Kyle shook his head, eyes scanning the uniform green-brown of the forest floor. No, this isn't rain. The path, it's gone. Like it never existed. Maya moved closer, voice low. That's impossible. We followed it here yesterday. I know the way back. Her hand brushed a branch, and it swung, brushing her face. No sound. Not a snap, not a rustle, nothing. Even the wind had gone silent. The three of them pressed onward, tentative. The trees grew denser, their roots tangled like ribs, squeezing the earth. Every step was soft against the mossy ground, yet strangely muted. Kyle's own footfalls sounded wrong, hollow, as though he were pressing through an echo that wasn't his own. Birds, squirrels, insects. Everything that should have been alive and alert in this secluded forest was absent. Okay, Tristan said finally, voice tight. Maybe we just need to retrace our steps, look for landmarks. Maya's lips pressed together, teeth grinding subtly. Landmarks? Every tree looks the same. Every slope, every shadow. It's moving. I swear it's moving. Kyle opened his mouth to argue, but the fog thickened between them, curling up around knees and shoulders, swallowing light. A faint glimmer of the morning sun pierced the upper branches in narrow shafts, highlighting only fragments of tree trunks. The space between seemed elongated, distorted, the forest stretching farther than it should have. They walked in silence, the only sound the soft padding of boots against moss. Yet even that felt unreal. Kyle kept glancing over his shoulder. The trail behind them gone. No sign of their previous passage. The earth looked unbroken, untouched. His stomach clenched. What if? Maya started, voice trembling. What if the forest? I don't know. It's alive. Stop saying that, Tristan snapped, though his jaw was tight. We're tired, cold. The fog's playing tricks. But Kyle didn't argue. Something in the stillness pressed against him, a weight in the air that seemed aware of their every motion. Branches overhead swayed slightly, but without sound. Leaves trembled, as though brushing invisible fingers across them. Even their whispers seemed to vanish, dissolving into the mist. Another bend in the supposed trail brought more confusion. A fallen log that had been part of their previous path now lay upright, a thick barricade, angled impossibly. Kyle remembered stepping over it last night, but now it blocked the way. Maya crouched to inspect the ground. Her fingers traced the moss. It's shifted, she said, voice barely audible. This log. It wasn't here. Tristan muttered curses under his breath. This isn't funny anymore. His eyes darted to a large tree ahead, a familiar marker, the one they had used to orient themselves. But when they reached it, the markings were gone. Carved initials and scratches smoothed away as though they had never existed. The bark was unbroken, pristine. Panic began to coalesce. Kyle's chest tightened, and the fog pressed closer, clinging to jackets and hair. Every step forward felt heavier, as though the forest had thickened the air, measuring their progress and resisting it. He called out, louder, and was met with immediate silence. Not silence as an absence of sound, but as if sound itself had been absorbed, swallowed whole by the trees, by the mist, by something unseen. Maya clutched his arm. "Do you feel that?" Kyle nodded. His own heartbeat thundered in his ears, unaccompanied by anything else. Even the birds, the insects, the rustle of the earth, everything natural that could reassure him had vanished. The trio pressed on, but disorientation grew. They rounded what should have been a bend to see a familiar boulder, a gray, mossy marker they had passed twice already. But its shape was wrong. The moss pattern reversed, a root twisted oddly at its base. Every landmark they recognized had been subtly altered, mirrored, rearranged. Tristan's voice broke the silence. Sharp. This isn't the way we came." They tried to backtrack, but the forest had shifted again. The fog seemed to thicken precisely behind them, masking any trace of their path. Their own footprints, previously clear in the soft, damp earth, had been erased. Nothing remained of the path they had carved through the forest. Fear coiled tightly in Kyle's chest. He glanced at his companions. Maya's face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief, trembling, lips moving as if to pray. Tristan's hands flexed at his sides, knuckles white, jaw clenched. The forest pressed in, shadows deepening unnaturally, branches and fog curling as if leaning toward them. A distant sound, or what Kyle thought was a sound, reached them. A soft snap, tentative, followed by another, as though someone or something was walking just beyond their vision. He froze. The sound was inconsistent, irregular. Not animal, not human. The forest swallowed it quickly, leaving a hollow where the noise should have resonated. Maya grabbed his arm. It's not natural," she whispered. "It's rearranging itself." Kyle swallowed hard. "We have to keep moving," he said, though his own voice felt strange, thin, muted. The fog thickened, the temperature dropping further, damp clinging to jackets, gloves, hair. Each step forward was a struggle, as if the earth itself resisted them. Hours, or was it minutes, passed. They rounded another bend to see a ridge they remembered clearly from the morning, a place where sunlight had pierced the trees and glinted off a small stream. But the stream was gone, replaced by an unbroken thicket. Every familiar feature of the forest had been subtly altered, mirrored, or erased. Their bearings were meaningless. Maya sobbed quietly, knees buckling. Tristan tried to steady her, but even his presence seemed insufficient. Kyle felt a creeping vertigo, the sense that the forest was alive, aware, observing them, erasing and rewriting the world behind and ahead. Finally, they stopped in a small clearing, indistinct and featureless. The fog swirled around them, the forest pressing in, dense and silent. Every trail they had taken erased, every landmark twisted, every sound absorbed. They were alone, but not alone. Kyle could feel the presence of something patient, unseen, shaping the forest around them, waiting. He glanced behind once more. There was nothing but endless trees and swirling fog. The trail was gone completely, as though it had never existed. He tried to speak, tried to call out, but his own voice felt swallowed, muted before leaving his lips. The three of them huddled together, shivering, trapped in a forest that no longer obeyed the rules of the world outside. The mist curled between their boots and ankles, curling upward like silent fingers. Shadows lengthened and contracted in impossible patterns. The canopy above seemed to tighten, closing, folding the forest inward. Kyle's chest ached with the realization. They had entered the forest as travelers. Now they were inhabitants, subject to its will. Every path, every log, every stream could be rearranged at its whim. It was patient. It waited. It watched. And it did not forget. He shivered as he looked ahead, into the indistinct gray. The forest seemed to pulse, to breathe, as if aware that they were trapped in its shifting maze. The three of them stood together, silent, as the fog thickened further, swallowing all familiarity. And in that moment, Kyle understood. There was no leaving the forest. Not now, not ever. The trail behind them was gone, and they had no idea what path, if any, lay ahead. It was just past midnight when Elle blinked awake, the damp nylon of the tent pressing cool and clammy against her skin. The forest outside was still, unnervingly so. Even the wind, which had whispered through the pines earlier, was absent, leaving a profound, almost physical silence. She shifted on the sleeping bag and noticed a faint smell in the air. Wet earth and pine, yes, but layered beneath it was something metallic, sharp, that made her stomach tighten. Elle froze. Something was different. Elle, Marcus murmured from the next sleeping bag, voice hushed and half asleep. I think you need to see this, she whispered back, climbing upright. She peeled back the flap and stepped into the center of the tent. The fabric was taut, smooth, unblemished on the outside, but inside, the walls were marked. Deep, erratic scratches, clawed in spirals and jagged streaks, streaking across the nylon from floor to roof. The marks were fresh, fibers fraying, blackened by some unknown friction. Marcus sat up sharply, the flap rattling in his hands. How? There's no way. He rose, squinting at the interior. Each line twisted unpredictably, as if whatever had made them had been testing the surface, hesitant and deliberate. This tent, it's zipped. Completely. We didn't leave it open. Nobody could. Elle shook her head, the hair on her arms standing on end. Exactly. We're alone. Nobody's outside. Nobody could have. Tristan, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward, rubbing his eyes. Maybe, I don't know, animals? Animals? Marcus repeated incredulously. That's the inside. The exterior's fine. No tears, no holes, nothing. Nothing could have gotten in here. A long silence fell. The three of them listened. Even the usual creaks of the forest, the rustle of leaves, distant animal calls, the shifting wind were absent. The air was heavy and thick, damp with the scent of pine and soil. The tent fabric pressed gently against their skin as if the world outside had shrunk and held them inside this pocket of quiet. Elle traced a finger along one of the scratches. The nylon gave slightly under her touch. Warm, almost alive. Her stomach twisted. It's like, it knew we were here. Marcus swallowed, a bead of sweat running down his temple. That's insane. There's no logic here. No explanation that makes sense. But the forest didn't seem concerned with sense. Every shadow outside the tent stretched unnaturally, elongating and retreating as the moonlight filtered through the trees. Even inside, the atmosphere seemed to shift subtly, the walls of the tent pulsating faintly against their fingertips. Tristan ran a hand along the floor. I feel pressure, like something's moving around us, but we can't see it. Elle shivered, glancing toward the tent's zipper. She wanted to check outside, to confirm reality, but a primal hesitation rooted her in place. The marks were deliberate, chaotic, yet purposeful, as if whatever had made them had entered, explored, and retreated without leaving the normal signs of intrusion. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Okay, maybe it's the forest. Like, this place is aware. I don't know how to say it, but it's messing with us. Elle's fingers dug into her sleeping bag. Messing or testing? Tristan's lips pressed into a thin line. Testing boundaries. Maybe seeing what happens if it breaches space that's supposed to be safe. The tent. Our little sanctuary. And now, we know we're not safe anywhere. A sudden draft made the nylon shiver. It wasn't wind. There had been none. But the tent fabric moved, faintly, brushing against their arms and faces like ghostly fingers. Each felt it, each flinched. The scratch marks seemed to shimmer in the pale moonlight, moving ever so slightly, as though the lines themselves were alive. We need to leave, Marcus said finally. Now. Pack up. Go somewhere. Anywhere. Elle nodded, but a part of her hesitated. Something in the quiet, in the way the scratches leaned and twisted across the walls, rooted her to the spot. The forest beyond the tent wasn't just silent. It was patient, watching, waiting. They scrambled to gather their gear. The sleeping bags clung damply to their skin. Zippers stuck in the cold, dew-heavy air. Every movement was exaggerated by the stillness of the world outside. Yet when they tried to leave the tent, they noticed the claw marks again. Fresh streaks now running along areas they hadn't touched. New lines cut across the floor where they had knelt, twisting upward into the walls. Elle froze. It's responding to us. Tristan swallowed hard. It's learning, watching how we move, how we react. That's why the outside's untouched. It's inside. Inside the boundaries we think are safe. Marcus exhaled sharply. So what? We stay or leave? They stared at the tent walls, the erratic scratches cutting diagonals and spirals in a pattern that had no logic but seemed almost playful. Mocking, observing, deliberate. Each of them felt the oppressive weight of the forest pressing against them. The way the fog lingered just beyond the mesh, as if waiting for consent to cross the threshold. They moved to exit, hands on the zipper. The three of them looked at each other, an unspoken agreement passing between them. Pull. And yet, when they hesitated, the tent walls rippled slightly, brushing against their arms. Not from wind, not from any external force. Something moved inside, separate from them, aware. Finally, Marcus pulled the flap. They stepped outside together. The night was still. Fog curled at the base of the trees, faintly reflective in the weak moonlight. The tent appeared untouched on the outside, perfect and sealed. No claw marks, no distortion, nothing. Only the usual forest, the trees, the moss, the damp earth. They stared back at it, unease coiling in their stomachs. It's gone, Elle whispered. No, not gone, Tristan said slowly. It's inside. They all glanced back at the tent. From the exterior, it looked normal. Nothing indicated what had been inside. Nothing betrayed the scratches or the subtle malice they had seen. Yet a faint rustling sound, impossible to locate, drifted from within. Nylon pressed lightly against itself in a rhythm too deliberate, too synchronized to be random. Marcus's jaw tightened. We should leave, we should run. But none of them moved. They knew, deep down, that leaving meant stepping into the same forest that had already tested them, observed them, rewritten its rules around their fear. Their sanctuary, tiny, familiar, controllable, had been invaded by something beyond comprehension. The tent walls quivered faintly again, brushing against the cold night air. And then, just as silently as it had started, the scratching ceased. The tent settled into perfect stillness, taut and unblemished. Elle swallowed. It's back to normal, she said. Marcus nodded, but the words felt hollow. For now. And for a long, suffocating moment, none of them moved. The forest waited. The tent waited. And something, some presence, aware, patient, remained inside with them. They didn't speak again. They couldn't. The night pressed on, damp and silent, and the three of them huddled together, listening to the absence of sound. Outside, the trees swayed slightly, though the air was still. The forest held its breath, and the tent, perfectly sealed, seemed to pulse faintly in answer. Inside, something watched.